much, you guys. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum, and a lot of breaking news this hour. We are just starting to get a look at documents that have been released by the Justice Department just a few minutes ago. This is the audio and the transcript from the jailhouse interview with Jeffrey Epstein's convicted accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. Justice correspondent David Spunt is going through all of this from Washington. We're just starting to get a look, reading through some of the introduction here. David, obviously it's early. There's a lot of documents and a lot of audio here, but what have you been able to see in these so far?
Well, in just a few minutes, Martha, we've been looking through this, and we can tell you the top line here is that there's no client list, according to Ghislaine Maxwell, and there are no high-powered individuals that were on any sort of list. She did not incriminate anybody in that 9-hour interview that she did with the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche. She said right here, quote, "There is no list. We'll start with that. The genesis of that story I can actually trace for you is from its absolute inception, if that is what you're interested in." That's part of the DOJ transcript. Todd Blanche went down to meet with her in a highly unusual move last month down in Tallahassee, Florida, where she was serving that 20-year sentence at the time. Now she's been moved just outside of College Station, Texas. She was Jeffrey Epstein's longtime girlfriend. She was convicted of helping him sex traffic underage female victims. I've reached out to her attorney. I've not heard anything from the attorney yet, but she also said, quote, "I do not believe he died by suicide." The official finding was that Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide in his prison cell back in August of 2019 in Manhattan. She was charged a short time later. Again, she's serving a 20-year sentence. So Todd Blanche, Martha, goes down, talks to Ghislaine Maxwell, does a 2-day interview with her. This is all part of DOJ's transparency effort to get information about Epstein out there after the Justice Department earlier in July said that the investigation wouldn't yield anything else. It was closed. And there was major blowback toward President Trump, toward Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Deputy Director Dan Bongino, and others. It's interesting, and you can stop me if I'm talking too much here, but it is interesting. I noticed President Trump in the Oval Office, Martha, was just asked at another event, a FIFA soccer event about an hour and a half ago about Epstein documents, and he commented on that. And he said, I told Pam, meaning Attorney General Bondi and others, to get as much information out as possible. But he said, I'm afraid that it might ruin some people's lives because anybody can be accused of anything. But really the top line here is Maxwell never had any type of client list of Jeffrey Epstein's, did not incriminate any high-power individuals. This coming from a well-placed source who's been briefed on this investigation. We're going through that as well. And then not to give our viewers too much information, but the Justice Department today actually handed over a bunch of Epstein-related documents to the House Oversight Committee as part of its investigation. And we know that James Comer just put out a statement, and he basically said that DOJ put out its first production of Epstein documents related to the subpoena, but that's going to take a long time before they put that out to the public because they have to get rid of any type of incriminating information, not incriminating information, any identifying information, I should say, of potential victims, Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell victims, Martha.
Yeah, this is very interesting, David. Thank you very much. And we'll let you continue to pour through these. We're looking through these documents as we speak as well. Let's bring in Jim Trusty, former federal prosecutor, get his thoughts on the early release of this, or the early reaction to the release of this, I should say. Jim, welcome. It's Friday afternoon, heading into the last week of summer as we get this drop, your reaction to it and what you've heard so far.
Yeah, I mean, all of it's really intriguing to me. I mean, again, the big picture is we don't normally look in prosecutors' files if there's not a trial. You know, we kind of let the evidence play out after an indictment. We see what happens at a trial. Here we've got this kind of bizarro world, I think maybe fueled by special counsels where they write reports, where everyone feels like we're entitled because we care so much about Jeffrey Epstein to look at all the evidence and find out if there's other names. Well, The reason we don't share files, yeah, it's partly to protect victims, and in this case, young women that were molested, but we're also protecting people from essentially defamation or guilt by association when they've never had a chance to totally acquit themselves. So this whole world we're living in now, where it's like, let's do an interview and then put it out for the world to review on a Friday, is kind of odd to me. Now, the starting point was a pretty typical starting point for federal prosecutors, which is a proffered letter. It's not full immunity. It's basically saying, for our conversation today, Ms. Maxwell, as long as you're truthful with us, we'll never use any of your words against you in any sort of prosecution. Again, very unlikely that there's going to be a new prosecution of her. But that's kind of a typical thing. They call it Queen for the Day immunity. And that's what she received to get this conversation going in the first place. And, you know, it seems like a lot of it's probably going to be kind of just a little bit self-serving opinions. Like, it doesn't really matter what Ms. Maxwell thinks about whether Epstein killed himself, but she wants to opine about it.
So why do you think they decided to release this? As was just mentioned by David Spunt, the president was asked about this in the Oval Office when he was talking about FIFA and the upcoming events in 2026. And he said, well, I've asked Pam, the Attorney General, to put out whatever they can. And just going through this, you know, there are names in here that have, you know, to do with who her father did business with, you know, and you can easily imagine people reporting, oh, well, this name and that name are in the Epstein file. But this is in sort of the groundwork that they're laying as they begin speaking with her about who her father, Robert Maxwell, a famous British publisher who was involved in a lot of businesses. So there are names in here that have nothing to do with the period, you know, this is before she ever met Epstein. So I see what you're saying, James.
Yeah, I mean, that's troublesome, right? I mean, you know, there's people that really didn't do anything wrong that are suddenly going to be in the spotlight. And that's just a kind of a strange scenario that we're finding ourselves in. You know, as to why they released it, I mean, look, the grand jury materials, I think, were kind of properly protected by a judge who said, no, it's not enough just that the world's really excited and wants to know kind of scurrilous details about Epstein and Maxwell. The judge, I think, properly, you know, respected the statutory protections we have for grand jury materials. This one's kind of different. I mean, I almost wonder if the Deputy Attorney General basically talked to the attorneys and said, you know, my intention is to release this publicly, and maybe she'll get some form of credit for that. And so we have to kind of wait and see a little bit whether the jail transfer made anything or if that was just coincidental. And then there is a vehicle for reducing sentences for cooperation called Rule 35 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure. It's conceivable that they'd say this was somehow very helpful and we're going to try to reduce your sentence. I'm not banking on that, but there is an actual mechanism they could use if they wanted to.
Well, we know that the families of the young women who were part of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial have spoken out very strongly, saying that they hope there is no leniency given to her. But we'll see if that happens or not. You know, it's interesting, at the beginning of this document, Jim, she talks a lot about the fact that she just wants to tell her story to the government. And she says all through this process, the government never interviewed me, never asked me any questions, and I've always wanted to tell them what I know.
Yeah, that's a two-way street, though. I mean, look, most of the time, particularly while Epstein was alive and pending a case, you know, it would have made a lot of sense for her attorneys to come to the government and say, hey, you know, she's in a position to help you out, and go down that route of being a cooperating defendant where you don't get a free pass, but you don't end up getting 20 years. You get some sort of reduction for cooperation. That didn't seem to happen on her end either. I mean, there are circumstances where as a prosecutor you say, I'm not going to make a deal with the devil to go after a demon. You know, I'm not going to cut slack to this person because they're at the high end. And she's definitely a partner of Jeffrey Epstein. But I think that if her attorneys had made overtures to potentially cooperate, she would have had that opportunity to tell the story. And, you know, it didn't happen. I don't think she can quite blame the government for that.
Yeah, it also is coming out that she says that former President Clinton, she saw he was on the plane with Jeffrey Epstein. I think we knew that. She says she never saw him getting a massage on the plane. You know, you think about how these things are going to be parsed and how carefully she may be phrasing some of these things, Jim?
Yeah, that's a red flag. I mean, you know, it's funny. When you talk about certain types of proffer sessions, when you meet with a cooperating defendant, I've had them with you know, MS-13 members, and I'd rather almost have the shameless sociopath, somebody that'll sit there and tell you right to your face how they killed somebody and not really have any sense of dissembling or rationalization. than somebody who's a little more sophisticated, like some of the white-collar type defendants. And the reality is she seems like she might be quite capable of rationalizing, dissembling, being very precise to the point of perhaps being deceptive. So in any of these circumstances where you're talking to somebody with an incentive to please the government like she has, you have to be really careful that she's not kind of playing you for a tune and telling you some stuff that's just a little too self-serving.
So in terms of the government's ability to change her situation, she was already moved from I guess a rougher prison environment to something that is a little bit more moderate, a little bit more comfortable for her to live in, I guess. What could happen to her next? You know, given the fact that she was convicted by a jury, what's down the road here potentially?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's totally in the hands of the federal government. I mean, there's two options. Her attorney was kind of shooting for the stars and settling for the moon, saying we'd be glad to get a pardon from President Trump. I don't know if that's in the cards. I don't think she's a particularly attractive candidate for a pardon or a commutation. But that Rule 35 I mentioned is a vehicle that can be used to reward cooperation. It's just normally the cooperation has to be a little more substantial than just feeding the press. It has to be something that helps you build a case or helps you, develop new targets. And again, too early to know what's in this whole series of transcripts, but it's not grabbing me that that's a likely outcome that would normally be a justification for some sort of benefit for her to reduce the sentence.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like the question, and you just put your finger on it. If it isn't information that is useful for a coming prosecution or a coming legal process, and it's just sort of to put it out there, it's hard to see what the leverage is for her in that.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of discretion. The judge has to approve of any sort of motion like this. And they usually do. You know, if a prosecutor says, hey, I know this person never testified, but they gave us some information that was helpful, gave us some leads, that usually will sell where a judge will consider a reduction. Maybe not to the extent of a reduction that the prosecutor asked for. But here we're just in this different territory of there is no pending case. We wanted to talk to her to kind of satiate the media beast and the people that are all dying to hear all these kind of, sexy details. And I don't know, doesn't grab me as something where she's necessarily going to be able to prevail upon Todd Blanche and company to give her a reduction in her sentence, even if that's entirely what drove her conversation.
Yeah, well, certainly her story has spilled out all over the place. There's about 6 or 8, I guess, audio tapes that have been released, and the entire transcripts of the conversation between Ghislaine Maxwell and Todd Blanche and more attorneys on either side. You can see these headlines crossing on the bottom of our screen that are also found in this transcript. She said that President Trump was a gentleman in all respects. She said that she didn't remember seeing President Clinton on the island, although I reported earlier that she talked about him being on the plane. So all of these, as you say, Jim, sort of salacious details that will be gobbled up by the press as Ghislaine Maxwell finally gets the opportunity to tell her story. And it's very lengthy on the front end, I'll tell you. She goes into her whole psychology of her relationship with her father. And I guess there's some suggestion that maybe that, set her up for a strange relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and maybe that she's looking to build that as some sort of excuse for the things that she was convicted for. But we'll continue to dig in here. Jim, thank you very much. Good to have you with us today.
Yep, good to see you.
The Justice Department is also sending some of the Epstein files over to the House Oversight Committee today. Are you in support of them releasing all of them?
Keeping it open.
If they wanted to release,
people shouldn't be hurt, but I'm in support of keeping it totally open. I couldn't care less. You got a lot of people that it could be mentioned in those files that don't deserve to be. People, because he knew everybody in Palm Beach. I don't know anything about that, but I have said to Pam and everybody else, give them everything you can give them, because it's a Democrat hoax. It's just a hoax. The whole Epstein thing is a Democrat hoax. So we had the greatest 6 months, 7 months in the history of the presidency, and the Democrats don't know what to do, so they keep bringing up that stuff. But it affected them. Bill Clinton was on his plane and went to the island supposedly 28 times. I don't want to bring that up, frankly. You have Larry, whatever his name is, Summers, the head of Harvard, who was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend. Nobody ever talks about that. I mean, but I don't want to hurt Larry Summers, but he was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein. No, this is a Democratic hoax to try and get the significance of what we've done over the past 7 months. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. They say it's #1 in history. What we've done, including stopping 7 wars. I mean, just include that. And now you look at the stock market today. It's way up to start off with from where I took it. And this market was going to crash. If Joe Biden or Kamala were president, this market we would have had a crash like in 1929. You're not going to have that. It's only a question of how high is it going to go. You know, I had the strongest economy in the history of our country. And despite COVID, we had the strongest economy in the history of our country. And we're going to blow it away this time. I was always good at making a lot of money. And whether it was for myself or whether it was, I like doing it this way better. I mean, I like making it for the country. Our country's been ripped off by friend and foe, nations all over the world ripped off. And the friends have been much worse than the foes for the most part. And they're not ripping us off. We just signed a deal with the European Union. They're paying us essentially $950 billion, like a signing fee. They're going to buy $750 billion worth of energy. They weren't buying much of our energy there. And they're very smart in doing it. And as you know, Ursula was here a couple of days ago having to do with the people, the leaders that we had a great, people said they've never seen anything like it. Well, we had the leaders of Europe right here in the Oval Office. And she's so happy that she has an agreement. But people aren't ripping us anymore. We're run by, this country is run by smart people now.
First breaking tonight, Jeffrey Epstein's sidekick, Ghislaine Maxwell, says she never witnessed then businessman Donald Trump receive a massage aboard Epstein's jet. She says he was a gentleman in all respects at all times. Tonight we're getting a first look at the transcripts from her 2 days of interviews with the #2 official at the Justice Department. Today's release came without any warning. Senior national correspondent Rich Edson has been looking through the documents all afternoon. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Jillian. The Justice Department unexpectedly released audio and transcripts covering about 9 hours of interviews with Ghislaine Maxwell. The conversation with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche covered Jeffrey Epstein's death and his relationships with Presidents Trump and Clinton. Maxwell said this about Trump's behavior.
I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
Now, the Epstein associate told Blanche she thought Trump and Epstein were friendly, but were not close. She says the photographs of Epstein and Trump together were from social settings. As for another president's relationship with Epstein,
you're not aware of President Clinton ever going to the island?
He never, absolutely never went, and I can be sure of that because there's no way he would have gone.
Earlier today, Trump repeated his claim that Clinton had been to the Caribbean retreat more than a dozen times. The department previously determined Epstein committed suicide in 2019 in jail, but Maxwell thinks otherwise.
I do not believe he died by suicide, no.
And do you believe that, do you have any speculation or view of who killed him?
No, I don't.
She also says that claims Epstein worked for American or foreign intelligence services are nonsense. And she denied Epstein kept a client list. Maxwell is serving 20 years in federal prison for convictions on sex trafficking and other crimes related to Epstein's sexual abuse of underage teens. She is actively seeking clemency from the Supreme Court. After her discussion with Blanche, prison officials moved Maxwell to a lower security penitentiary in Texas. The Trump administration has been under pressure to release all the government's documents related to the Epstein case. This afternoon, the Justice Department separately delivered more Epstein documents to the House Oversight Committee to comply with a congressional subpoena. Maxwell has maintained her innocence. Prosecutors allege she was properly convicted of recruiting vulnerable teenage girls, grooming, and abusing them. Jillian?
All right, Rich Edson with those details for us tonight. Thank you.
All right, now let's broaden this conversation out. Joining me to do so is former CIA analyst Buck Sexton. He's a nationally syndicated radio host with the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show, and nationally syndicated political reporter Selena Zito. Also, we have with us Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. Let's take what we've heard so far, Buck, and tell me what you make of what she has to say about President Trump, about the client list, about Bill Clinton.
Well, I think she's largely affirming what is already known and not really advancing the knowledge of the case at all, which is unsurprising if you look at the motivations that she would have at this point. But first, in terms of what is known and solidifying what is known, President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong. There's no evidence. There's no indication. There's nothing whatsoever to suggest that President Trump ever did anything wrong with regard to all of this. So many of us have known that from just the case files and everything going back for quite some time. But she vociferously and repeatedly goes to that. OK, so people can put that aside now. I mean, I don't know how much more is going to be necessary for that to become. Look, there are people who will hate Trump and try to lie about him no matter what. But I think that's affirmed now in a way that we can move beyond it. She also says, essentially, nobody else did anything wrong. She didn't see any, meaning other than Jeffrey Epstein, she didn't see any criminal conduct that Jeffrey Epstein even did herself. There is no blacklist. Now, that's always been a shorthand, and people talk about a blacklist. What they really mean is people who were blackmailed. But, Will, as I was going through the transcripts, she says there was no blackmail. She also says, at all, of anyone, she also says that the money was made through high-stakes financial deals. What? There's some things here that just still don't add up, and I think we need further clarification on some of the points that she made, and I think that maybe that will be forthcoming from the DOJ.
So you're absolutely right, Buck. I think there are very legitimate questions about Ghislaine Maxwell's motivations and credibility. And in just a moment, we're going to be getting more into those deeper issues that accompany questions about blackmail and international or domestic intelligence. But let's stick with the names for just one more moment. Jason, I want to read to you now. We're working on ingesting this audio. This all just dropped about 1 hour and 10 minutes ago. But I want to read you now from page 265 of the interrogation from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. He asks Ghislaine Maxwell, and you're not, I think you said, you're not aware of President Clinton ever going to the island. To that, Ghislaine Maxwell says he never, absolutely never went to the island. And on that note, Jason, there have been a lot of questions. Obviously, the political focus has been of late on President Trump. We've heard Ghislaine Maxwell on Jeffrey Epstein's relationship with President Trump. But there remain a lot of questions about his relationship with Bill Clinton.
Yeah, this is a person in Ghislaine Maxwell that knows a lot about Epstein, that he has, erectile dysfunction, but, plays the part of Sergeant Schultz and can't recall anything that anybody did any wrong. That list may not be written down on some nice, cute spreadsheet, but it's in her head. And I wish they would just ask her the simple question. Well, then the people who visited the island, start writing down a list. If you're going to get limited immunity, you better start coming up with a list. And, you can verify whether or not President Clinton went to the island. Go ask the Secret Service. There's a reason. The Secret Service is secretive, but they're also law enforcement. And if there was a commission of a crime, they still need to answer questions. They shouldn't be bashful about asking them. And I think they should go to that direction. But I don't buy what she's selling at this point. She is highly motivated to say whatever she needs to say in order to get out earlier. But come on, there's 2 people that went to jail. Only one of them is still alive. And there's nobody else that did anything wrong. And you can't come up with anybody else who did. What were these young women doing going to the island? Playing hopscotch? Getting lessons on how to sing or play the violin? Come on. There's a lot more here.
Okay. And here is another big question. We'll go to you on this, Selena. The question that everyone has been asking for several years. Did Jeffrey Epstein commit suicide? She was asked this, again, by Todd Blanche. Here's that exchange. So you think he did not die by suicide, given all the things we've just talked about? Ghislaine Maxwell responds, I do not believe he died by suicide. No. What do you make of that, Selena?
Well, I'm not surprised by that answer. This is someone that believes that they knew him well, probably knew him better than anyone else. So for her to make that assumption, that's not surprising. You hear that from people all the time when they lose someone to suicide. That I can't believe they did that. Right? This is her version of saying that. So that doesn't shock me. The other thing I think is important to note, and the woman's name escapes me, but the reporter from Miami who had done such great reporting on Epstein has said all along that there never was a list. And so she kind of reinforced that. Now, to her other things that she said, like nothing, untoward happened. Well, she's just protecting herself, right? In that moment, she's in that bubble of self-preservation.
The idea that there would be a list does defy common sense for any common criminal. Why would you maintain your own evidentiary criminality? But to Jason Chaffetz's point, that doesn't mean there aren't clients. Just because there might not be a list doesn't mean there are not clients. And Ghislaine Maxwell could be put to the test on naming the names, creating the list after the fact of people that she saw on the plane, Buck, or at the island. And again, we are digging through this virtually in real time. I'm not seeing that here. I'm not even seeing Ghislaine Maxwell pressed on what are the names of these clients.
Yes, I mean, if you were to take Ghislaine Maxwell at her word here, and I think all of us, you, Will, and the rest of the esteemed panel are looking at this like, come on, we understand that there's likely a lot being held back or outright falsehood at this point, although it'd be tough to prove some of those falsehoods. It depends. This is, I think, a moment where we have to ask, hold on a second. If she's unmotivated here to tell the truth, what are we going to get out of this? And I think that that's where you have to see other aspects of this trial coming together, because she's telling us that essentially the only criminality that occurred here was Jeffrey Epstein's, that he hid, that even she, who was so close to him, didn't know about it. It's just not credible. It's just not credible. That part of it, I think, is where it most obviously falls apart. And as for the list or the possible blackmail list, again, I think this is a little bit, the terminology has become a stumbling block here. It's, to your point, Will, clients, people who were involved with Epstein, who were giving him fantastic sums of money and other things, and we don't really understand still to this day. He was involved in getting like large sums of money, but how? What exactly was he doing? This is all traceable. This should all be trackable. I want to know how Epstein made the money that he did. I want to know what the transactions are he was involved in. And that should all be something that the Treasury Department, the FBI can get access to, because in the meantime, what we're left with is Ghislaine Maxwell effectively downplaying this whole thing. Yeah, he was a pedophile. He hid it from everybody. Nobody else was involved. There's no proof of anything else. There's no blackmail. There's no foreign intelligence tie. Oh, wow, that just brings it all together with a bow for her, doesn't it? She probably wants to get out early. So I think that we have more digging to do. I think the DOJ transparency effort here is the right thing. But the reason it's on a Friday, Will, is I think there are no smoking guns. There's other places we have to look.
Well, Buck, you appropriately pushed the conversation to the deeper and more important conversation. The existence of a client list or salacious names who may have had relationships with Jeffrey Epstein in some ways has been a distraction to the deeper story of who was Jeffrey Epstein and who were the people around him, like Ghislaine Maxwell. Who is Ghislaine Maxwell? For that matter, who is her father, Robert Maxwell? Well, this all came up in this interview.
All right, it's time to bring in our panel. We've got Fox News contributor Mark Thiessen, Real Clear Politics White House correspondent Phil Wegman, and Democratic strategist Megan Hayes. Great to have all of you with us here on set tonight. Mark, let's start with this. Take a listen to Ghislaine Maxwell talking to Todd Blanche about former President Bill Clinton.
I think you said you're not aware of President Clinton ever going to the island.
He never, absolutely never went, and I can be sure of that, because there's no way he would have gone. I don't believe there's any way that he would have gone to the island had I not been there.
Nobody would believe it. I mean, to listen to her speak on these audio tapes, you would think she's Mother Teresa.
I know.
Nobody she knows has ever even thought anything inappropriate.
Yeah. So she says there's no client list. There is a client list. I know there's a client list. You know how I know there's a client list? It's in her head. She was the pimp. She was the one who procured the girls. She was the one who was his connection to all the wealthy people. No one went to the island without her permission or without her recruiting them. She knows every child who was abused. She knows every person who did it. I remember, in the old legal shows, when you interrogate somebody, you take a legal pad and a pen and say, write down your statement. Somebody should give her a legal pad and say, write down the list. She's got it in her head.
Megan, the big question today is why on earth they are talking to her now. Blanche asked her some questions about President Trump. Take a listen to this clip of one of her answers.
I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
I mean, I am in the camp that everyone should be held accountable, from Democrats, Republicans, the people who manage the money. All of the people should be held accountable. There is absolutely no reason that anybody she should not be the only person in jail for this. There are hundreds and hundreds of victims, and to your point, she knows who the victims are. She also knows who the perpetrators are. There needs to be more accountability being held. So if that's releasing more files, if that is more interviews, and that's what needs to be happening. This is disgusting that we have let this go on so long, and there is literally only one person in jail for it.
In a way, Phil, this effort undertaken by the Trump administration to bring transparency to this has given this woman a platform to defend herself, to defend her disgraced associates, to defend the horrible things that they did for decades.
And despite that lovely British accent, Ghislaine Maxwell is a monster. She's a self-motivated monster because right now she wants a pardon. I'm not surprised during this interview that she went out of her way not to make any new political enemies, but I doubt that the public is going to take at face value anything she says. And I don't think that this is going to get rid of the scandal around this. Some of the claims that she made, to Mark's point about there not being a list, or even the claim that there were no recordings that she saw, just aren't true. For instance, we already know that Epstein's New York mansion was wired and there were cameras everywhere. So I doubt that this is the end of anything.
Well, there was some other big news today. We could talk about this for the whole panel, but I want to get you guys to respond to the FBI raid on former National Security Advisor John Bolton's home. Took course, and his offices took course over, a few hours this morning and afternoon. What do you make of that?
So one thing that no one ever has accused John Bolton of is being stupid. He might not like him, you might not agree with him, you might think that he betrayed Donald Trump, but he's not dumb. So I would be surprised if he had classified documents lying around in his house, or by the Corvette in the garage, or something like that. On the other hand, the FBI can't simply raid somebody's house willy-nilly because Kash Patel says they should. You got to go to a court. You got to go to a judge and get a warrant, and you have to show probable cause that you're going to find something. So there's got to be something that told the judge, yes, you can go and do this. And it's real simple. Either John Bolton did something wrong and he has things he shouldn't have and information that he shouldn't have in his home, or he didn't, and one of them is going to be in trouble as a result.
John Bolton ain't dumb, but neither is, former President Biden, former Vice President Mike Pence, President Trump himself, all who have mishandled classified information in various settings. Would you be surprised if the FBI hauled documents out of there that we are ultimately going to see were classified?
I would be surprised, especially at this point. His book has already come out. That is what this is about. This is political retribution here. And I think the really unfortunate thing is there are people who break laws who deserve to have the FBI raiding their homes. And every piece of when the DOJ is weaponized and the FBI is weaponized, that just sows mistrust more in our government and more in our prosecution of these different institutions. And that's really I think the biggest unfortunate thing that happened today.
What was your take, Phil?
The president says that this is nonpartisan, that this is just law and order. And for proof in the Oval Office today, he said, look at some of my other enemies. They're just fine. But the impression among the president's supporters, and one that I think FBI Director Kash Patel fed into with that cryptic post on Twitter, is that this is cosmic karma, that this is John Bolton getting what he deserves for betraying the president. And in their mind, this isn't the crossing of a Rubicon after the raid on Mar-a-Lago, after Steve Bannon went to jail. The one thing that I think we do know right now, though, to your point, a judge signed off on this. And then my sources inside and outside of the administration, they say that this is about much more than the book. They say that there's actually some there. So we'll have to wait and see.
We did hear earlier today that, from Chris Swecker, from Jonathan Turley, that the bar here, the legal bar for executing this warrant and this search is pretty high, to Phil's point. This is not just about something that was printed, years ago in a book.
Yes, and there was an investigation under the Biden administration that was stopped. So they claim that they're resurrecting that investigation, and there's got to be, you can't just barge, the constitutional standard is the FBI can't just barge into your home and search for things because they think there might be something there if they don't have any evidence. You have to go to a judge, you have to get probable cause, or else you can't do it.
Megan, last word to you.
I think that's all true, and I think that is definitely fair. But I do think when the the director of the FBI and the attorney general start tweeting things out at the exact same time this house is being raided, it makes people believe that it is a political attack, and it makes it feel very much like retribution from the president.
There were a lot of tweets about Donald Trump's 91 indictments and multiple civil suits and 2 impeachments.
Not at the
and
exact
all the
same
rest of
time.
that.
Not at the exact same time that his house was being raided.
Panel, got to leave it there. Thanks for joining us tonight. Great talk.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.